Think of all the craziness we've seen in the last 4 years. These people aren't going to go out without a fight. And if indeed the only way to get him, short of God forbid killing him, which I hope for his safety every day and pray for it, is you blow up the system and blame him for his policies and his cabinet and his radical agenda.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin weekly specials for December 3rd through December 10th, 2024, while supplies last. Right now we have 1 ounce silver backdated South African Krugerrand at just $3.19 over spot per ounce. We also feature the limited edition 2024 1 ounce gold UK Lion and Eagle coin at just $99 over spot per ounce. And finally, 1/10 ounce gold Britannia are just $29.99 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're always delighted to have this widely followed returning guest. Andy Schectman is the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. He joins us for this weekly market update on Liberty and Finance. Today is Wednesday, December 4th, 2024. Andy, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Great to be back, my friend. Appreciate you having me. Happy belated Thanksgiving to you and your family and everyone out there.
And I wanted to be grateful with all of our viewers and subscribers for your increasingly live stream presence with us most weeks. This one is pre-recorded, so folks won't be able to answer your questions live during this one, but we'll get back to that next week. But we do have some questions that have been submitted ahead of your arrival that we're going to field with you. In fact, I'm going to give you a quick summary for everybody's benefit. What we're going to be capping today. One is some important changes that have occurred regarding IRS mandated reporting on the parts of dealers for people who are really interested in making strategic moves to maintain their privacy. That's one thing we're going to be talking about. Another thing is what has changed with Trump incoming as the president-elect. And there are many rumors swirling about big changes that are going to happen to our economy, big changes that are going to happen to a balance of trade, big changes with the dollar or the Fed, et cetera. We're going to zoom in on some of those really closely. One is the U.S. debt and deficits and versus the GDP, et cetera, and the fact that large portions of our debt have to be refinanced at higher rates coming up. Also, the reported U.S. economic boom that many people are anticipating with Trump coming in, and how that will be impacted by tariffs and retaliations and trade wars. And thirdly, inflation and destruction of people's savings and dollar-denominated earnings, savings, and retirements. Is that likely to change, or is that baked in the cake? We've also heard of Trump calling for the weaker dollar, low interest rate policies, and Fed policies that would support the stock market. So all of what President Trump's incoming policies are likely to do, if anything, to change the landscape that we're facing in terms of people's financial lives. We'll zoom in on all of that and other things that you bring up along the way. But first, if we could kick us off with that idea of how people can maintain their financial privacy when we have some shifting tectonic plates of IRS clarifications. One of those is about like-for-like swaps, and the other one is about non-reportable categories of metals. So could we take those one at a time? First of all, non-reportable categories of metals. In the past, we've been saying, and subject to lists that include silver rounds as well as silver bars. Are silver rounds still in the reportables category from what we've obtained recently?
No, and nor is pre-65 junk silver in quantities of $1,000 face value or more, or rounds 1,000 ounces or more. We used to have to get a 1099-B and report that as a sale. Now, even though now we don't, and I'll explain why in a second, it's always important to remember you still do. It's your obligation to report. It just means that we're not doing it on your behalf. We're not taking your social and filling out the 1099-B form, which never shows how much you paid for it. I mean, it could be your first transaction with us. You're selling us metal. It just shows that you and your social security number sold X amount of ounces of silver or gold at this point. And that goes in, and assuming it matches up with your filing at the end of the year, obviously there would be no issues. But the law basically now says that the only things that are reportable on 1,000 ounce sale or greater would be those bars that are NYMEX, COMEX approved that could actually settle a contract. A lot of people think in order to settle a COMEX contract, it has to be a 100-ounce bar. No, that's not the case. It could be, or a 1,000-ounce bar in the case of silver. It could be 100-ounce bars. It could be kilo bars. It could be 10-ounce bars. And you could settle that contract with those NYMEX, COMEX approved bars. Not the case with rounds. You cannot settle a COMEX contract with rounds or pre-65 silver. So those two subcategories used to be reported by the dealer via 1099 in quantities greater than 1,000 ounces in the rounds or 1,000 face, which is 715 ounces in junk silver. Not the case anymore, just the bars that can be settled for a COMEX contract. So freeze those two things up to no longer carry dealer reporting requirements.
That's very interesting for a lot of our clients who have been keenly interested in obtaining U.S. lineage coinage. For example, we've talked a lot about junk silver and the pre-65, the utility for that as emergency preparedness for barter, emergency coinage, that sort of thing. And yet a detraction potentially for people in acquiring that was thinking, gee, I've got this useful asset, but it's one that is subject to mandated dealer reporting if I were to sell it back or swap it in large quantities. Sounds like that is now no longer mandated dealer reportable, which is helpful to people when they're making their planning. The other one that comes up is like-for-like swaps. In the past, we were under the guidance that if someone swaps in, for example, silver bars for silver coins, and there's just a cost basis carry forward, and it's not necessarily a reportable event if it's a like-for-like swap. Has that understanding changed now?
Yeah, and I would argue that it actually increases your privacy, even though you have to report it. Go figure that one out. I'll explain it in a moment. But they changed the category, and now it is considered personal property, and each transaction is individual to itself. So there is no like a 1031 exchange where you're trading a home for a home or a piece of property for a piece of property with the ability to carry forward your tax basis, your cost basis. Well, that's not the case any longer. Now, of course, if you had a loss on what you were swapping, sure, that's fantastic. You could write it off. And I don't know what the rule is about not reporting something that is a loss. I'm not sure how that works. You still need to report it? I don't know. Maybe that's something I should know. Maybe you know. But the point of it is that obviously it takes out the reason that would de-incentivize, what would de-incentivize some or disincentivize someone would be, well, I got a big gain in this, and if I sell it and have to report it, I'm going to have to pay those gains and the capital gains. And well, whether you do or you don't, if we're talking about privacy, I think this actually increases your privacy. If we're talking about inconvenience in paying taxes, well, look, you pay your taxes, you establish a higher cost basis, so maybe that's a benefit, but there is no way out of paying your taxes if it's reported, and even if it's not, you're supposed to. But what I mean by increasing your privacy is that, let's say you have 100 1-ounce gold bars, and you'd really rather have American Eagles. So you sell the gold bars, you take the proceeds, and you apply it towards gold Eagles. Now, in that transaction, it would be reported if it is the items that trigger reporting, like 1-ounce gold bars. Now, if it were kangaroos into Eagles, well, there is no reporting on the kangaroo. On gold, let's just say what it is in gold for a moment. It's Maple Leafs on the 25th ounce. It's Krugerrands on the 25th ounce. It's Mexican 50 pesos on the 25th ounce. And then it's gold bars in any size greater than a kilo or greater. So let's just say you're trading 100 Maple Leafs for 100 gold Eagles, or 100 1-ounce gold bars for the balance in American Eagles. Yeah, we would have to report that. And, so there's no way around that. But that's where the reporting ends, right? And so the reporting ends at that point. So now the proceeds of that sale are applied to your new purchase, which means legally you have no paper trail pointing to the acquisition of what you just swapped into. No, I sold all my gold and silver in 2024. And if your accountant says, what'd you do with the proceeds? Well, that's none of your business, what I did with the proceeds. If you were audited and the IRS asked you, what'd you do with your proceeds? Well, they're right here. I put it into this, which is completely legal. See, the loss in privacy, Dunnigan, as you know, in buying gold would be writing out a check or sending a wire. So if you sell, now again, this is only if those items are reportable. If it's anything other than the Mexican 50 peso, the Krugerrand, the Maple Leaf, or gold bars, then there is no dealer reporting. Doesn't mean it's not a separate transaction. Just means we won't report it on your behalf. But assuming that it's one of the items, whether it be gold or silver, that would trigger, you're doing 1,000-ounce bars or 100-ounce bars into Silver Eagles. Yes, there's going to be reporting when you sell over 1,000 ounces, but that's where the reporting requirement ends. You don't have to report to anyone what you did with the proceeds. You could have used that check to paper your put it and put it in a frame in your kitchen and never spend it. I mean, the point of it is that you get privacy actually through reporting by showing you sold your metal, and here's the receipt to prove it. Here's my 1099. Here's my tax filing. No one says what you do with the proceeds. Well, the proceeds were just applied towards your next order. Therefore, you never wrote out a check or sent a wire to accumulate it. So arguably, it's less convenient because of the reporting or because of the separate tax dealings. It's not a like for like. It's a separate transaction. But I would argue it actually enhances your privacy. I'd call it constructive reporting. Gives you more privacy by reporting it, because I don't own it anymore. I sold it.
We also wanted to talk with you about the big picture that people are looking at here at the after the election of President Trump, who'll be incoming January 20th, is there's a lot of expectations swirling around changes that he may bring to our country and to people's financial lives, not the least of which, let's start with the biggest elephant in the room, and that's the U.S. debt trap, as Alistair McLeod and others have described it, that according to those analysts, we're past the point of no return, that the U.S. debt to GDP ratio and the U.S. deficits are spiraling upward and can only continue to do so, regardless of who's at the helm in the Oval Office. But others are looking and saying, no, Trump is going to, by putting America first, he's going to take care of the debt, he's going to reduce our deficits, et cetera. What is your view of whether a new president in the Oval Office is going to be able to arrest and reverse the being past the point of no return in terms of debts and deficits?
Yeah, I mean, look, the national debt right now is at $36.5 trillion, right? And even in the best case scenario, he does a massive amount of slashing and cost reductions. And now the deficit goes from $3+ trillion to $1 trillion. So he comes in with a $36.5 trillion debt and leaves with just over $41 trillion. That's unsustainable. To Alistair's point, we've crossed over that Rubicon, if you will. That doesn't even take into account the unfunded liabilities, the Medicare, the Medicaid, the Social Security, the pensions. The only way that we would ever get through this and really get to a point of cutting and balancing the budget and paying down our debt and getting to the other side would be to tackle the things that no one has the courage to do. And Trump already said is off limits: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, military pensions, and the benefits for the veterans, and all of these things that no one has any intention of touching. So let's just say that he cuts $2-3 trillion off the irresponsible fiscal policy. We're still going to be running $1 trillion+ deficit. That's just the way it goes. And it's going to continue to grow. And as we've talked about before, the Congressional Budget Office says, look, in 3 years, just the interest on the debt alone will take and this is the debt, right? This isn't the continuing deficit. Just the interest on the debt alone in 3 years will take 100% of all of the income tax revenue, that and mandatory entitlements like Medicare and Social Security. So how do you continue to be the world's dominant superpower when things like military are discretional and you're borrowing it? That's a problem. And to Alistair's point, I agree with that. I think any way that you look at it, we have to deal with this. It's kind of like the Shawshank Redemption when he climbed through that 2-mile tunnel of disgustingness to get to the other side. Well, we need to do that too, somehow, some way. You can bring back all of your manufacturing. Well, first of all, we are at way behind the 8 ball in our manufacturing, in the facilities, in the capacity, in the machinery. And then you talk about the cost of labor, way higher here than it is around the world. So not only would it take time to onshore our manufacturing at a big cost, to bring people in, to train them, to bring the new equipment in, to get that up to speed, at least the 4 years that he's here. But at the same time, just the added cost in labor, in building these facilities out, and then in the tariffs that he wants to put on all of these countries will be extraordinary to the people in this country. And so we have to deal with this no matter what. His policies, as you mentioned, low interest rates, weak dollar, that's highly inflationary and loss of purchasing power, really. And I think that's what he will do, and what will happen. So, there is certainly no reason to be concerned about where gold and silver are ultimately going. At the same time, because of his policies, we could see, strength in the equity market, strength in the crypto market. And we could see that for sure, and strengthen the bond market, believe it or not, because at the same time, you got all these people buying crypto, it's actually stealthily supporting the bond market. And a lot of people don't even understand that. But if you look at the main trading pair between Bitcoin and the dollar, it's USDT, Tether, and USDC, which is, I believe, backed by Goldman Sachs. These are the stable coins that are 85% invested in treasuries and the rest pretty much in dollars. And so as people are leaving the legacy system, they're actually supporting it through these crypto vehicles that are actually putting their money in U.S. treasuries to help support the system. It's an interesting dichotomy. But any way you look at it, I think we're far from seeing the end of the gold and silver boom, not even close to it. And you can see that by the continuing increase in purchases and deliveries off of COMEX. India just bought another 150 or 60 or 70 million ounces of silver just in the last month or two. And this is not stopping, and it won't stop. And look, tariffs are legitimate, right? Tariffs can be a legitimate economic tool. Sanctions are not. It's financial warfare. And that's really what they're all angry about, is the continual use of sanctions and tariffs that are kind of mirrored as sanctions. I mean, they actually are sanctions. I mean, tariffs are supposed to support your domestic manufacturing and production facilities, which we really don't have. So what are we actually protecting? Nothing. We're just adding a tax onto the American consumer. We are, in effect, sanctioning these countries for having the nerve to try and find a different settlement system. And it's funny, when you look at what he said, if you read what he said, in fact, let me see if I have what he said about that. I don't know if I wrote it down. Basically, what he said is that if the BRICS even think of doing a common settlement currency, well, they're in big trouble, right? Well, or a common currency, a common BRICS currency to upend the dollar, that's not what they're doing. And as Jim Rickards says, it'll be a decade before they do that. And I'm okay with that statement. What they're trying to do is find a common settlement currency. That's what it's always been. A common settlement currency where they trade in local currencies. And as Jim also says, you don't even need to have that fully in place. If you just use gold on a net basis, you trade in local currencies and then settle any net differences, not gross, but net differences once a month, once a quarter in physical gold. The banks pay the countries the local currency, they settle back and forth, and then at a pre-described time, you settle net in gold. Well, that is, in essence, a de facto settlement system. It's nowhere near what they will ultimately do. So they're not trying to roll out the BRICS currency. They're trying to find a settlement system, which is different. And it will only crystallize their resolve. And you're going to see pushback. You see China just yesterday said, we're not going to send all of these rare earths that are used in things like satellites and radars and all of these high-tech things, that they all end in idiom. And he's pushing back against this. So, yeah, no, I don't think that we've even begun to see the ultimate ramifications, and nor do I think we've even begun to see the end of the gold and silver bull market. Yes, the knockdown in gold and silver was easily predicted. And since that happened, just in the first Commitment of Traders report that came out 2 weeks ago, when they knocked it down, the commercial banks, as we've talked about ad nauseum, that have been getting killed by the price rise in their wicked short positions, they covered 15,570 gold contracts at 100 ounces apiece. Well, that's an awful lot of gold, over 1 million ounces of gold. And they covered that, or 1.5 million ounces of gold that they covered just within the first week, 5,700 contracts of silver within the first week at 5,000 ounces apiece. They used this exuberance as a rationale, or as good fortune, to push the ball down the hill, let the price fall, and then all of the selling and the exiting of the arena by the weak hands, the managed money, translated into massive short covering, hasn't changed a darn thing. In fact, quite to the contrary, I think gold and silver in this environment that we have coming in front of us, this inflationary weak dollar environment, will do exceedingly well. And I think the Fed won't stand in the way of its rise, and they're letting it stair step. Instead of the call to revalue gold, as Senator Loomis from Wyoming talked about, or the head of the Dutch National Bank, which immediately pops it up, I just think they're going to let it go up 3 steps, back 1 or 2, up 3, back 1 or 2, up 3, back, and they're not going to stop it because it will reliquefy the balance sheet of the Fed, and it will behoove all the central banks anyway. So no, to me, gold and silver have not even begun to see the final chapter. But I can understand why people say that, because look, we've all lived through bizarro world for 4 years. We all have. And there is, by every step and by every measure, reason to be optimistic that we get our culture back, we get our country back. But the monetary part, the as you mentioned, crossing the Rubicon, well, that has to be dealt with one way or the other, and that should be very beneficial for hard assets, all commodities, as far as I'm concerned.
Let me follow up on a couple points you made there, because I think it emphasizes even stronger what you said. One of the things you mentioned was about these untouchable entitlements that no one has the political backbone to tackle. We have this Department of Government Efficiency, et cetera, looking for egregious waste in whatever departments and getting rid of certain departments, perhaps. Great. Bureaucratic state was never part of the Constitution, et cetera. However, the idea of safety and security that people feel when they say, oh, my entitlements are untouchable, that's only on the surface. As you've talked to us about the art of war, you never really let people know what they're really doing, what you're really thinking. The fact that they're destroying the value of people's Social Security and their pensions, military pensions, and all these other things by, we're going to fulfill nominally, but we're going to devalue the dollar. And we'll have to touch on that again when we talk about inflation and destruction of the dollar. But that it's a cowardly and politically expedient way of lying to people. Well, while you're telling them, don't worry, we got your back, you're basically just carving out so that they can't live on. People feel the pinch. They feel the pain. Is there any comments you want to add on that one in particular?
Of course they do. And I just think the fiscal outlook, regardless of the substantial spending cuts, remains dire. That's just the bottom line. And I think the persistent growth in the debt, it's just going to highlight the systemic fiscal challenges that are ahead of us. And you feel safe, but you're right. I mean, at inflation running at the levels that it is, and will probably be reaccelerated, having your dollar, your wealth in dollars can be catastrophic, as we've talked about. In the last 10 years, the dollar's lost half of its purchasing power at a 7% annual increase in money creation, which is the same thing as, that is inflation. You're inflating the money supply. And now it's arguable because a lot of that money has been held up and holed up in the Federal Reserve. But when you talk about the massive money creation, that's probably much higher than 7%, actually, if we knew the truth. But let's just call it at 7%. Into 72 is 10.2 years. That tells you how long before your principal doubles, or in this case, how long it takes for the currency to be cut in half. A decade ago, it was cut in half. You hold all your money in dollars, you're destined to go broke, at least in terms of purchasing power. And that is something that is certainly well worth understanding. And that's one way that the government makes it much easier to maintain their, all of these handouts, all of these promises to facilitate the debt and be able to service the debt with watered down dollars. It's a lot easier than making the very tough decisions and actually cutting those programs, which they won't, they can't. And that's why guys like Alistair say it's too late. We're already past the point of no return. And maybe Trump understands that. And I think it would be a much dirtier 4 years if God forbid he had been shot? And what would the world look like today? What would the world look like if she won? And he's not out of the woods yet. I pray for his safety, honestly, every day. I do, because he's standing up against the military-industrial complex. He wants to put an end to the war. He's standing up against the CIA with all of the disinformation and all of the censorship. I've done 2 interviews with Kash Patel. He's going to take on the FBI. This guy's no nonsense, and he's taken on the biggest names in the world, and he's taken on the deep state. All of these people, I'm sure, are not happy. So I do pray for him, and I think there is reason to be optimistic because of his cabinet, because of his desire to stand up to the deep state, to Langley, to CIA, to the military-industrial complex. These are dangerous, very powerful entities that, this is a guy that could be playing golf every day all around the world. I played Trump Turnberry in Scotland. It's incredible. I played Trump West Palm on election day. This is where they tried to shoot him the second time. It's incredible. Nicest golf course in Florida that I've ever played. This is a guy that instead of doing that, sipping champagne and eating caviar and playing golf all around the world with a beautiful wife and a beautiful family, instead he's doing this for us, and I do respect him for it. I do, and I think we should all be grateful. That's part of the reason I think we see this, people are worried. Well, and they should rightfully be optimistic, but it doesn't change the monetary fiscal side of things. What it does is it allows us, and I've been very vocal upon my disdain for what's happened to this country. It's too stupid to be stupid. How many times have I said that over the last couple of years with you? Well, that's why I'm optimistic. But I want to read something to you. I know you didn't ask me this. I want to read something to you because I think it goes to show just how bad it was. And thank God that Trump is here and hopefully cooler heads prevail. You see him pardon his son. And what father doesn't understand that, except what he did was he lied to the American public, massively. It just makes you feel that everything in this administration was a lie, right? No, I will not pardon him. Yes, I will accept what the juries say, and then he pardons them, and then doesn't take any comments and heads off to Africa, not pardoning anyone else, just pardoning his kid. It's just disgusting. But I want to read something to you that I read yesterday, done again, and I was so taken back by it. I think your listeners will be too. Let me just read it here. Hang on, let me find it. It's one of the worst things I've read in the last couple of years. Here it is right here. And so this is Lindsey Graham, who's really not a good guy, and he's talking to Sean Hannity. And he says, he outright says that the war in the Ukraine is all about money. He says to Sean Hannity, he says that the U.S. stands to financially gain from the Ukraine's vast agricultural sector and $2 to $7 trillion worth of rare earth minerals, alike in a prospective wartime deal with the war-torn, albeit resource-wealthy nation. This war is about money. People don't talk much about it, but the richest country in all of Europe for rare earth minerals, well, that's the Ukraine. $2 to $7 trillion worth of minerals that are rare earth minerals, very relevant to the 21st century, Graham declared. Ukraine's ready to deal with us, not the Russians. So it's in our interest to make sure that Russia doesn't take over the place. Ukraine is the breadbasket of the developing world, Graham must. 50% of all the food going to Africa comes from the Ukraine. Graham also emphasized that the incoming Trump administration is uniquely positioned to cash out on such resources. Donald Trump is going to do a deal to get our money back. I mean, I almost threw up when I read that. To enrich ourselves with rare earth minerals. A good deal for the Ukraine, really, said Graham, and he's going to bring peace. Now, to me, this is just like Iraq. We went there under false pretenses. Oh, we destroyed your whole country. Sorry. And we've toppled your regime, and we're still here 20 years later. What do you know? And we got our finger on Iran, and we're probably pillaging their natural resources. And as it is, they don't even get to control the proceeds of the sale of their natural resources. We hold it, the New York Fed. So here we are. We go into the Ukraine. We've given them over $200 billion. We just gave them another $175 million. No congressional oversight. F-16s and Stinger missiles, prodding the potential for World War III. And this idiot has the nerve to say it's all about money. It's a good deal for the Ukraine. We've killed millions of their men. We've destroyed. Our family is very close with a husband and a wife who moved to Florida here, real close to me, who had a thriving business in the Ukraine and now are barely paying the bills and eating it's just awful. I won't go down that road, but simply to say they've destroyed the country, killed millions of men, destroyed the infrastructure, and now they have the nerve to say it's all about money and the natural resources and the rare earths that China just said, we're not going to send you these rare earths right now. Well, it's okay. We'll steal them from the Ukraine. And that's a good deal for them? Really, is it? And do you think that that's really what they wanted? And so this whole 4 years has been a lie. It has, and in every respect. And so I think that's why you see people who are overly optimistic and justifiably so, rightfully so, but it doesn't change the monetary fiscal outlook. What it does is it will stop me from just continuously lamenting about how this country has lost its mind. And hopefully we get back to the ideals that made this country great. We deal with it little by little. We start to fix our problems. We get our fiscal house in order. We get our bearings back. We trim the fat. We start to bring back manufacturing. We don't have to do it all at once. And so that when your kids and your grandkids are older, they have a future, because God forbid that it didn't work out that way. And Harris won. I don't know what the next 4 years would look like or the next 20 years. So yes, I am optimistic, but no, this is not the end of the bull market. Probably it's actually just the second phase of it.
One of the aspects of what you just mentioned about the war grabbing for resources in the Ukraine, echoing what happened in the Operation Desert Storm, et cetera, has been framed with quotes recently from people who have been on our channel saying that financial wars typically result in hot wars in the end. And that concern is that even as the outgoing administration, there's what Ron Paul described as neocons putting pedal to the metal, trying to accelerate aggression from NATO backing of Ukraine into Russia, et cetera, using British and U.S. Advisors right there on the ground, how to operate these advanced weapon systems, et cetera. But even with Trump coming in, if there's this retaliation and escalation of trade wars around the world, not just with tariffs, but with, okay, you're not going to take our chips. Well, then we're not going to give you strategic materials. Okay, well, if you're not going to take certain technology from us because you think it may be, a security risk to your country, well, we're not going to take any of your technology. And these types of retaliations that really can escalate into financial war between countries have often resulted in real war. Any concerns from your side about the groundwork being laid for additional risk to our geopolitical lives and therefore our financial lives because of this tendency for financial wars to escalate into real wars?
I mean, I take Putin at his word. I think he's very angry, but I also think he understands. I think he's a lot smarter than Biden, and he understands what they're doing. Or this current administration. I think he's probably got speed dial of Trump on it. I'm sure they're talking. I hope they are. Hopefully he understands. He just got to hold out a little bit longer. But yeah, these missiles that are made in the United States are long range and they're flying into the heart of Russia. That's imagine it was Mexico we were in a war with, and they had funded $200 billion and gave MiG jets and missiles that were flying into Kansas. Would we be okay with that? That's a provocation of war. It is. And thank God that he hasn't retaliated in a much more vengeful way. You could argue he has a right to. And if it were the other way around, people would be screaming, we have to retaliate. Hopefully it doesn't. I do hope it doesn't. I think that the trade wars are real, and there's a potential that the BRICS countries could say, you know what, we don't care anymore. We represent roughly 50% of the global GDP right now. And control the majority of the strategic shipping lanes and on-ground lanes and much of the production of the commodities that are needed to make the world go round, from precious metals to wheat and to soft commodities, to rare earths, to all of the countries that they're in partnership with. And are building under their Belt Road Initiative, which right now is the majority of human population. It's 150 plus countries. The majority of it on the Belt Road these are all, most of them, underdeveloped, resource-rich countries. They don't need, probably, to trade with the United States. It's a big statement to say, but they are growing at a pace where maybe they could go it alone if they had to. Now, I'm not saying they're going to, but you're going to see an escalation in trade wars for sure. And we just want to hope that these folks understand that, Trump may be overplaying his card and he may be just kind of setting the bar high, willing to back off. That's the deal of, the art and I don't know. I just think that we have a much greater possibility of making it through this without getting into a very hot war when they understand who's coming in and taking aim at the folks that have created this mess. So let's hope cooler heads prevail. But yeah, I do think that we're going to see much, much higher prices to the consumer. If indeed we do see these tariffs and these sanctions, it will only affect the consumer in the end, who will pay much higher prices for goods that we're getting from all of these countries. Not only that, the componentry or the natural resources that are needed to make things that we make. So yeah, I don't know how well thought out it is, but I would expect higher prices or price inflation, certainly just with the tariff threats against Canada and Mexico and China, independent of any of the BRICS types of threats that he's made with 100% tariffs and whatnot.
Yeah, I wanted to zoom in with you on the inflation question now, square on, because Trump early in his first term talked about, we should have a strong dollar, we should be strong. And then later in his term, he was all about, no, we need a weaker dollar, we need negative interest rates, and he had big bank representatives in his cabinet and advisors, et cetera. He's now still calling for a weaker dollar and lower interest rates and supportive policies by the Fed to support the major stock market indices. So what is your view of inflation going forward, given Trump's current and past actions and who the people he's choosing and the people he's surrounding himself with?
Ultimately has to be higher. You can't have a weak dollar. You can't have low interest rates without expecting to have much higher inflation. And it's very inflationary by nature. You add on to it tariffs, which will only be a responsibility of the end user consumer, who it's not going to be these countries that are paying these or paying the fees. They're going to pass it on in the form of higher prices. Sorry, the sun's right in my eyes. I would expect, then again, that inflation only gets worse moving forward and maybe considerably worse before it gets better. I don't think there's any way around that. And then it comes into play, who finances all the unfunded liabilities that we have, the near $200 trillion. No one even talks about those. So inflation has to come. There's no way around it. And either that or you just blow up the whole system and start over. But inflation is here, and it's only going to get worse. The tariffs will make it bad. The weak dollar will make it bad. The low interest rates will make it bad. The removal of restrictions will increase inflation and will increase productivity, but will increase inflation. The removal of taxes or the lowering of taxes will increase inflation. All of this is inflationary, and I think that is the policy that they have chosen, and it's where they're going. And again, another reason to not be reliant on keeping your wealth in U.S. dollars. It will be inflated away right out from underneath you. It's a whole heck of a lot easier than going outright into a depression. You raise interest rates high enough, you're going into a depression. You bankrupt the banks, you blow up the banks, you make it impossible for businesses to raise capital in a much more highly high cost of money environment, and that spills all the way down, to the labor market and to the end users. There really isn't an easy way out of this, and I think it's much less painful to choose inflation over raising rates and trying to tighten your belt, which will have massive ramifications across the economy, starting with the banks. So to me, it's the lesser of two evils. It's what they've always chosen, and it's what they will choose this time too.
We get asked often by clients about when will the dollar crash, or what is the real risk to their savings in the banks right now. And one of the concerns that has been present is about the banks needing to, a lot of the commercial loans being out there needing to get refinanced at higher rates going forward. And also just that the destruction of the purchasing power that you just described through inflation is already It's like, it's not when the dollar will collapse. It's, as you pointed out, it's already collapsed by 50% in the last decade, and that's accelerating. So any words of wisdom to people who in the current incoming administration, as far as the risk to their basically their life nest eggs being in the banking system, and what people should be considering as they look forward to doing where their nest egg is likely to be most preserved and preserve their purchasing power.
No, if you keep your money in the big banks, you're crazy. I mean, that's just all there is to it. And you're right, the commercial real estate problem hasn't even really played out yet. There's an awful lot of these loans that will need to be reset in 2025 at double the cost of money from where they previously were locked in. Not to mention, the regional banks own 70% of all the small business loans and leases. So it's not a warm, fuzzy picture for the banking industry, and the traditional forms of liquidity that we've seen over the last year in the reverse repo market and in the BFTP, the bank BTFP, the Bank Term Funding Program, are both basically at zero. So yeah, I would expect there to be many more consolidations in the banking industry, and I think that is ultimately what they want. They want to consolidate the banks. Certainly the Federal Reserve wants to consolidate the banks. And I think the banking problem is nowhere near over yet, not even remotely close to it. Trump is not coming and fixing that at all. That's a problem that has to work itself out. And if indeed we see more of the same, where they try and lower the federal funds rate, but the back end of the curve keeps going higher, the 10 and the 30, well, that's what the banks are loaded up on, 10-year treasuries. And so it only destabilizes the banks even more. It only makes the resetting of loans, higher mortgage rates, higher lease rates worse. And the Fed doesn't control the back end of the bond market. If they do, then that's monetization of debt. They go in and impose yield curve control. They're the only ones dumb enough to buy the 10-year and the 30-year, and that's hyperinflation, or the seeds of it. That's what Alistair is basically saying, that we're too far down the debt rabbit hole. If you go and fix the debt and tighten your belt, you blow up the economy, because that means higher rates. And the other way is, if you choose inflation, well, you better not be fully loaded up in dollars. And yes, it's easy for me to say buy gold and silver. I could argue that buying, even the stock market will go parabolically higher. Doesn't mean it won't correct, because the major value is holed up in a handful of stocks. But all of these assets could do very well. Cryptos could, stocks could, and commodities should in this environment. But the other thing that I think about a lot, and maybe I'm way off base, you're in this market for so long, I am, and you start to think, like, where is the line between conspiracy and reality? I think about if there is a deep state who is trying to dismantle, the one way to get them would be to pull the rug, right, on the banks or on the market, however they would intend to do that. You have three massive bubbles of money, where you have 7 or 8 trillion in money markets. You got the majority of all the wealth in the stock market in a handful of stocks, and you got everyone now running into crypto. It's not hard, I would think, for these folks to pull the plug and then blame everything on Trump, his administration, his crazy, radical policies, and go right back down that same horrible place that we've been for the last 4 years. That makes me nervous. Is it way off base? Maybe. I don't know, but I think about those things, because if you don't think about those things, you have a very short memory. Think of all the craziness we've seen in the last 4 years. These people aren't going to go out without a fight. And if indeed the only way to get them, short of, God forbid, killing them, which I hope for his safety every day and pray for it, is you blow up the system and blame him for his policies and his cabinet and his radical agenda. And that's the reason why that it happened. And because he's only got 4 years, right? And we hope that he has 12, him, and then, maybe it's President Vance then for 8 years. If it's only 4 years, that means we're in trouble. That means that he will be blamed for whatever happened moving forward, rather than the realization that he's the only one with the courage to stand up to get us on the right path. But that means you have to go through a period of time of great difficulty. And that's the part that I think people are underestimating. we should be very excited that his policies are addressing the problems. But to Alistair's point, you get far enough down the rabbit hole as we have, there is no easy way out without a reset, or maybe that's what he understands, or without a default, or without a massive inflationary, situation to be able to service an ever-increasing debt and the fiscal irresponsibility. Even with the Doge committee, look, we're still going to have $1 trillion+ deficit again. And so he comes in with a $36.5 trillion debt and leaves with a $41.5 trillion debt. It is not sustainable in the long run.
One more topic before we wrap, and that is, you mentioned earlier short covering by the bullion banks, and how that has been a profitable mechanism for them to start the snowball rolling down the hill. Then when others pile on, then they're able to cover at the opportunistic bottom. I wanted you to, if you could, address that with our clients who have been dutifully and strategically accumulating metals over the years, trying to amass a strategic, tangible asset for their family and their family's future. At this time when there's been a pullback in metals prices, should we all be realizing that the most informed and highest connected players in this whole global financial game are doing exactly that? They're doing opportunistic buying on these pullbacks, both internationally through the BRICS nations, central banks, but also even domestically through these bullion banks when these opportunities present themselves.
You and I became friends about 4 years ago, and I consider you a good friend and ally in this world. I don't know how long you've been following the gold market. I've been doing it my whole life since I was 19. And I will tell you that my whole career, when the price would get hammered like we saw, a $200 drop in gold, you kidding me? It wouldn't come back for years. I mean, years. And it would just keep on falling. And, a $3 or $4 drop in silver, well, the closest thing I can remember that was 2011 when it was $50 an ounce, and we've never gotten back there again. And although we're trying, that was more what it was like my whole career. And now you see what happens. They knock it down, and it's come 70% of the way back up, just like that. That's kind of been the hallmark of and this is even with great optimism for the new administration. This is exactly what we've seen over the last year or two, great strength underlying the market, and these pullbacks, while very, very aggressive and steep, they don't last very long. And here we are again. I mean, gold's up today another $7, and we're climbing back up, but already north of 2,650. People were saying gold's going to go below 2,500, and it didn't. And silver was going to go into the 20s. It didn't. It may have touched it for a second, but here we are back up to 31 and change. So I think that's exactly where we've gone. First of all, you have a large portion of the world who says, thank you for doing that. We would like to buy more and stand for delivery. But these are banks that are facing an existential threat to their balance sheet. 4 to 6 billion ounces short in silver in London, 7 to 800 million ounces short on COMEX, and massive short in gold on both sides of the pond. They are using it because I think they understand ultimately it's going higher, and it is a fool's errand to continue to naked short. So yeah, they're going to do all they can to cover these positions, which can really end up putting them out of business if it were spike high enough. And that plays right into the hands of those who are playing the long game, like the central banks of China and their sovereign wealth funds and the People's Liberation Army, and the central banks of India and their sovereign wealth funds, and of Russia, and on and on and on. They're using this environment to cover. And, they shouldn't be this short to begin with, but it just goes to show there's great demand, and it's hidden at the highest levels of the world. But I'll go back and I'll simply say this, Dunnigan, there is no reason that the Bank of International Settlements, who thinks years and years and years in advance, would have reclassified gold as the only other tier one if it wasn't going to be part of the game. And the central banks, who all you hear is Bitcoin, 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 but what are the central banks buying? Oh yeah, they're buying gold and silver. They're not buying Bitcoin. What is a guy like Bill Gates buying? Farmland. It's like tangibles are what the big money is buying, commodities. around the world. And whether it's rare earths or soft commodities or precious metals or base metals, that's what the biggest, most informed money in the world is buying. And that's where my skepticism, and again, I guess you could say I've become somewhat jaded, and I try not to be. I try to look at this pragmatically, but, is it a psyop, if you will? Put everyone into a few areas, money markets, handful of stocks, and into cryptos, and try and pull the rug and blame him for it? Maybe, hopefully not. While at the same time, you don't see countries saying, other than El Salvador and a few others, that we're going to massively accumulate Bitcoin. When you look at what Trump said about the strategic Bitcoin account, it wasn't to buy more. It was to take what they already own, that they've confiscated through criminal activity, and use it to pay off the debt. It was Cynthia Loomis from Wyoming who said she wants to revalue the price of gold and take some of the proceeds of that revaluation to buy more Bitcoin. But that's not something we're hearing or seeing from all of the world's central banks. So I think that you do what the biggest money in the world is doing and not what you hear all around you. Look at what they're doing, and I think it gives you a roadmap to where this ultimately goes. And remember, the BIS, they know the playbook better than any of them. They're the central bank. They make the rules, like it or not. They wouldn't reclassify gold. And then you look at the way it's all being accumulated in Europe. It's almost completely uniform across all of Europe, that they all have the same amount of gold in relation to their GDP. And that's where you got guys like, I forgot his name. He's a heck of a writer. I think he writes for Money Metals Exchange, Neuenhaus, the guy that writes for Money Metals, and he's saying it is a stealth plan by the European banks to all have roughly the same amount and then to revalue gold, the way Cynthia Loomis talks about, the way the head of the Dutch National Bank talks about. You cannot have a cryptocurrency that is that volatile backing a system, but you can with gold. And I think that's the ultimate play here. So you don't probably want to catch a falling knife, but you can see as it turns right back around. To me, you cost average your way back in if that's what you're going to do, or in if that's what you're going to do. I think ultimately waiting in this volatile world we live in, I don't know how it plays out, but uncertainty is smoothed out by cost averaging. I guess that would be the easiest way if you still believe that gold and silver have a pathway. I do, to my soul. And, think about misdirection. We're kind of being misdirected here into all of these places as the rest of the world gobbles up the gold and the silver and the rare earths and the base metals and the soft commodities and the farmland. They're buying up the tangible. So it's just food for thought. I guess that's what happens when you've been doing this long enough. You kind of try and, or maybe the line between conspiracy and reality is blurred. Maybe next week I come on, I'll wear my tinfoil hat, but is it really that crazy after everything we've seen to think this way? I don't think so.
Yeah, first you got to get a supply of tin, because that's also one of those strategic materials. Okay,
there you go.
Andy, we're over time, and I'm grateful for your presence here.
Yeah, I have a bad habit with that.
No. It's been great. It's always valued by me and by all of our viewers and subscribers.
It's always a pleasure to be with you too, brother.
But guys, if you don't want to miss a single episode with Andy, make sure that you're on our free mailing list. Just go to libertyandfinance.com, put in your email address, click submit. That's libertyandfinance.com. Email address, click submit. You'll get a confirming email, and then you'll get one email in your inbox every day with all of our interviews with Andy, any of our weekly specials, and all of our interviews with other returning guests. Andy, do you want to hit the weekly specials before we wrap today? So that
I have a problem with that all the time. Kind of like if people only knew how hard it was for you to, in our intro, say what day it is. I mean, if we had a blooper reel that was 4 years old, it would be 2 hours long, and it's always just that opening statement. You always forget what day it is. I always forget what the specials are. I do know that one of the specials that is not on there is a continuation of pre-65 junk silver constitutional at $1.89 over. And I made that promise to another show I'm on, so I want to extend it to everyone so no one's caught off guard. $1.89 over on pre-65 silver to me is the best value, period, in silver. Do you happen to know what our specials are?
Yeah, we've got the backdated South African silver Krugerrand coins at $3.19 over spot. Those are 1 ounce. We've got a continuation of the British mint 2024 Lion and the King coin at $99 over spot for gold. And then the 10th ounce gold Britannia coin, while supplies last, those are backdated at $29.99 over melt per coin.
Yeah, and there are very, very, very few, maybe the only one other than the Mexican Mint that makes 10th ounce sovereign mint coins. We'll have a special next week, something different that I don't want to announce it yet, but I will announce it next week for sure. But a special deal we have with the Royal Canadian Mint. But I will say to you that if you're looking for barterable coins, a 10th ounce British sovereign or a bag of junk silver, you're talking the best way to actually trade and have utility and flexibility. The Krugerrand, one of only 3 sovereign mint coins that don't have Queen Elizabeth or
King Charles.
King Charles, thank you, on the coin. A lot of people like that. And the Lion and Eagle coin that we have, which is a limited edition gold coin issued by the UK Mint, again, limited edition, but being sold at fair prices. And it's okay to buy limited editions if you're not being sold delusions of grandeur. And this is one of them. So cool coin, but whatever you're buying, everything's on sale right now. So may not be that way forever, but good availability right now. So I like all of them.
Yeah, that comes to my mind when we're talking about short covering as an opportunistic buying opportunity for those who are cost averaging and want to accumulate strategic assets. So on behalf of all of our viewers, Andy, thanks for joining us again here on Liberty and Finance.
You're my favorite, brother. You stay well, and look forward to picking up with you next week.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for December 3rd through December 10th, 2024, while supplies last. Right now we have 1 ounce silver backdated South African Krugerrand at just $3.19 over spot per ounce. We also feature the limited edition 2024 1 ounce gold UK Lion and Eagle coin at just $99 over spot per ounce. And finally, 1 10th ounce gold Britannia are just $29.99 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.